Welcome to Sovereign Soul Radio. Here, we cultivate conscious conversations to support those of us who are healing and awakening now. I am Ivy, a consciousness steward and holistic practitioner, and please join me in these conversations that are so necessary for our transforming human reality at this time. May we all leave these conversations differently than we came. Where we go one, we go all. And so it is. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Sovereign Souls podcast. Again, I am Ivy, and I'm really happy that you're here with me today. So this episode today, we are talking about the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. So these are two lists of food, of like our basic produce food that we all eat or should be eating, and really looking at the degree of how toxic conventionally grown produce is, and what like the worst produce items that are like literally like the dirtiest and the most harsh on our bodies when we're looking at overall toxicity, and also a list of those that are the most gentle and the cleanest considering when they're conventionally grown. So this podcast is relevant to you if you eat food. If you eat food that is fruits or vegetables, and if you don't eat fruits or vegetables yet, you're probably not feeling too good, and eating fruits and vegetables is how we get ourselves better. So this podcast for really all of us, okay? Because this is information that we as consumers, but just we as human bodies need to know about. So this should be a shorter podcast just because it's, very specific information that I'm giving you here. All of this can be read on a website that is linked in the show notes also if you want to look at this for yourself, but I'm gonna break it down for you here as easy as I can. So these two lists that we're talking through, the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15, why does this even really matter to most of us? And considering that most of us are on some type of budget when it comes to our groceries, and a lot of us aren't in places where we are eating strictly 100% everything organic, okay? So because most of us have to purchase conventionally grown produce from time to time, or maybe that's what we eat in totality, but what we do want to know is, of all of that food, what is the most dangerous for us to be eating? And when I say dangerous, I literally mean danger. Danger. And why is that? And that's because most of our produce items of conventionally grown fruits and vegetables have alarming numbers of pesticides, herbicides, and fungicides sprayed onto them and put into the soil. And what happens is that as we're eating these things, as we're putting these items into our bodies are being rebuilt with the food that we put in our mouth hole, of course. So we end up becoming consubstantial with what it is that we're eating. So if we are eating, food that is much more heavily loaded with these agricultural chemicals that have been absolutely proven to be cancer causing, hormone disrupting, nervous system degrading, like these things have huge effects in the human body, especially when we are eating them quite regularly. And then also if we're not living healthy lifestyles in general with appropriate, gentle, continuous detoxification to kind of offset the burden of what's going into our mouths, we easily end up over time in situations where our health is failing, where we're having hormonal imbalances and nervous system issues and digestive tract problems and lymphatic problems. And, we've got all of these illnesses and symptoms and inflammation and all of this. And, often our doctors and whatnot pretend that they can't understand why these things are happening. But it's like, you just got to look at it. The quality of things that we're putting into our mouths, the quality of things that we're putting into our bodies, and the backward lifestyles that we lead in many, many ways. So this all comes down to cause and effect. So I'm here to just help you think more accurately in certain ways. And we really, we are 100% in charge of ourselves. We are 100% responsible for our health situations. So like most all issues that we deal with. So the neurological, the hormonal, the inflammatory, the digestive issues, the all of the things that we deal with that aren't caused by some type of like accident or something that we were born with, pretty much all other things we completely do to ourselves, generally unintentionally, but that means that our own awareness and growth as humans is how we get out of our places of suffering. So talking all types of suffering, it's all an invitation for our growth. So before I get too far on any tangent, let's get back to this list of the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. So this has been a way that I personally have shopped and eaten for the most part for about 7-8 years now. And this is a guide that is just so good. I share it with my friends, I share it with my family, I share it with all of my clientele, because knowing these two lists absolutely matters. So if you want to like put them on your phone or print them out, put them on your fridge or something, like these things, you want to kind of generally memorize them so that you eat this way when you're at a restaurant that, most restaurants aren't organic. And when you're going shopping, you purchase within these guidelines. So the company or the organization that I have been watching for these last about 7 years, is called EWG, or the Environmental Working Group. And so every year they do a whole bunch of amazing research, and then they also compile other research from other researchers, and they come up with an annual list of like the Dirty Dozen, which is like, these are the 12 produce items that even after we wash them and peel them like people do, they still have extremely high levels of pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, and those are things that will screw up your body. So we've got the Dirty Dozen list, and then they also provide us the Clean 15 list of, an annual recording of these are the 15 conventionally grown fruits and vegetables that have the least, the most minimal amount of pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, and therefore, if we're not affording organic food, these ones are the safest ones to eat of conventionally grown, if that makes sense. So let's get to these lists finally, and then we're going to talk them through a bit deeper, and then even go through like more of the whys, like the scientific whys behind why this conversation is so damn important for all of us. Okay, so starting with Environmental Working Group's Dirty Dozen for 2019. Number 1, strawberries. Number 2, spinach. Number 3 is kale. Number 4, nectarines. Number 5, apples. Number 6, grapes. 7 is peaches. 8 is cherries. 9 is pears. 10 is tomatoes. Number 11 is celery. And number 12 are potatoes, white potatoes, not sweet potatoes or yams. Okay, so that is our list of the 12 dirtiest produce items when they are grown conventionally. So each of these foods tested positive for a number of different pesticide residues and contained higher concentrations of pesticides than other produce. So the key finding in that list of the 12 dirtiest things is that more than 90% of samples of strawberries, apples, cherries, spinach, nectarine, and kale tested positive for residues of 2 or more pesticides. Also, multiple samples of kale showed 18 different pesticides, and kale and spinach samples had on average 1.1 to 1.8 times as much pesticide residue by weight than any other crop. That's crazy. Okay, that's crazy. And EWG, they go a little bit deeper into the kale situation, so I'm gonna even share a little bit of that right now. So this study came out in March, and basically showing that nearly 70% of the produce sold in the US comes with pesticide residues, which we know. But the surprising news with this is that it reveals that the popular health food that kale is among the most contaminated of all fruits and vegetables. So 92% of kale samples had 2 or more pesticide residues detected, and a single sample could contain up to 18 different residues. That's insane. That's so insane. So like those kale chips or the kale salad and at the fancy restaurant, that's like a lot of extra shit that your body has to deal with. The most frequently detected pesticide that's found on nearly 60% of kale samples is abbreviated as DCPA, and it's classified by the Environmental Protection Agency since 95 as a possible human carcinogen. Therefore, it possibly causes cancer in people. And also, this has been banned in Europe for 10 years already. America, what the F? And so just overall, the USDA has found over 225 different pesticides and pesticide breakdown products on the most popular fruits and veggies that North Americans are eating every day. And remembering that this produce is all like washed and peeled just as people would prepare for themselves at home. So washing, peeling does not remove all the pesticides by any means. And one really good way to just like deduce in your own mind if a fruit or veggie is going to be cleaner or dirtier when it's conventionally grown is you want to look at like the thickness of the skin. Generally, that'll make a huge impact on it, where like our greens, our spinach, our lettuces, our kale, are grapes with really thin skin, or like the peaches and the nectarines and the strawberries, like the things that are too tiny and too thin skinned to like obviously effectively wash. Those are the things that are going to be dirtier and more of a toxic burden on the body. Whereas when you look at the like the hardier skinned, thicker skinned fruits like your avocados or bananas and oranges and things like that, you know, they have more of a resilient exterior to block the insides that we consume from all of these dangerous things as much. So that's just one way to kind of like think about it on your own. And so with that, like different fruits and different veggies can have vastly different levels and numbers of pesticides detected on the crop. And all research agrees on the health benefits of a diet that includes fruits and vegetables and eating fresh produce, of course, whether it's organic or conventional. Eating our fruits and veggies is so essential for health. So for that reason, again, this guide is such an important resource, because the more contaminated our body becomes, like the more unwell we're going to be on all levels, physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. Okay, everything is everything. Nothing in our lives is isolated. You know, everything is everything. So even when it comes down to like what we're eating and how we're eating it, makes such a huge difference in our lives and in our daily experience of being a human being. And so again, there, our dirty dozen are our strawberries, spinach, kale, nectarines, apples, grapes, peaches, cherries, pears, tomatoes, celery, and potatoes. So all of these are going to be listed out in show notes as well. And if you want to swing over to ewg.org, you can even check out an expanded list on that goes obviously higher than 12 if you're a little nerdy and you really want to get on top of understanding this concept. So let's get now to the EWG's Clean 15 for 2019. And so again, these are the produce items that are conventionally grown that have the minimal amount of pesticides and whatnot compared to all other samples. So to start the list, we are starting with avocados. So again, avocados, they are pretty darn clean. You know, if you're on a budget, you don't have to buy the organic avocados. You can buy the regular conventional grown avocados in it, right? We've got that thicker skin, which we like. So Clean 15, number 1, avocados. Number 2 is sweet corn. But one little thing about corn is that often like the crops are genetically modified. So honestly, when it comes to anything corn in my life, I go organic or I don't even do it. Okay. And so, okay, we've got avocados, we've got sweet corn. We've got number 3 on the Clean 15 is pineapples. Number 4, frozen sweet peas. Number 5, onions. Number 6, papayas. 7 is eggplants. 8 is asparagus. 9 is kiwis. 10 is cabbages. 11 is cauliflower. 12 is cantaloupes. 13, broccoli. 14, mushrooms. And 15 is honeydew melons. So with this list, these are the 15 items that if we're on a budget, buying these, A-okay to go conventional. I mean, this stuff still has shit on it, so still go organic when you can. But again, the previous list, the Dirty Dozen, those are the things that if you're going to bother eating them, you buy them organic, okay? Especially if we're dealing with like hormonal issues, fertility issues, health challenges, we're like acidic and inflamed and like, or even losing weight. If any of that's going on in your body, absolutely that Dirty Dozen list, you want to buy it organic or not even eat it, okay? And so Clean 15 again was avocados, sweet corn, pineapples, frozen sweet peas, onions, papayas, eggplants, asparagus, kiwis, cabbages, cauliflower, cantaloupes, broccoli, mushrooms, and honeydew melons. So relatively few pesticides were detected on any of these foods, and tests found that low total concentrations of the pesticide residue. So that is fantastic. And the key findings with this list were that obviously avocados and sweet corn were the cleanest, and less than 1% of samples showed any detectable pesticides. That is great. More than 70% of the Clean 15 fruit and veggie samples had no pesticide residues. That's also really great. With the exception of cabbage, all other produce on the Clean 15 tested positive for less than 4 pesticides. And multiple pesticide residues are extremely rare on the Clean 15 vegetables, and only 6% of Clean 15 fruit and veggie samples had 2 or more pesticides. So that is also just, those are great things to know. Those are great things to know, especially when we're buying groceries on a budget. And again, at ewg.org, you can see like a full expanded list of fruits and veggies for both the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. So for those of you who are nerdy like me with this, or those of you who, want to understand more so that you can heal faster and easier, I am going to add in more conversation about the rest of EWG's studies in regards to this list and why it's important to both you and I. So let's talk health benefits of a diet low in pesticide residues, because if you're eating a diet that is like really not actually that aware yet of eating organic foods, or we're just like, we're really eating on a budget and not being discerning between what needs to be organic and what doesn't, it's like this is absolutely impacting a lot of people, okay? So a French study published last December, they found that among nearly 69,000 participants, and those with the highest frequency of organic food consumption had 25% fewer cancers than individuals who did not eat organic food. So that's huge. So even right there, saying that like 70,000 people, that is a really decent study size to get an accurate estimation of what they're looking for. And so, right, eating organic, 25% fewer cancers. That's really important. And then in 2018, data from the Harvard University, they found a surprising association among participants between the consumption of foods high in pesticide residues and also fertility problems. So these findings raise important questions about the safety of pesticide mixtures found on produce and suggest that people should focus on eating fruits and vegetables with the fewest pesticide residues. And in fact, the most recent of several studies evaluating the impact of an organic diet found that after only 6 days of eating organic food, 6 days, just that, 6 days of eating organic food, adults and children had on average a 60% reduction in the levels of synthetic pesticides measured in their urine compared to when they were eating a conventional diet. And the study found that an organic diet can reduce the level of different neurotoxic pesticides that can harm the brain of a developing fetus, and also these ones that are probable human carcinogens, and Also, there are pesticides that can harm bees. So all of this, again, matters a lot. And a lot of us just like don't even think about this when we're eating things. When, again, most of us and all of our health problems are completely related to these little choices that we're making on a daily basis. So genetically engineered crops, which are also known as GMOs. Let's talk a little bit about this. This is also really great information that is found within this list on ewg.org. And again, I'm not affiliated in any way. However, I appreciate that this form of information is available to us as consumers. And again, especially if you're healing your own body, wanting to lose weight, because weight always has to do with inflammation and toxicity, and or if we've got a spouse that needs healing or a little one, all of this matters. Okay, so GMOs. Most processed foods typically contain one or more ingredients that are derived from genetically engineered crops, such as corn syrup and corn oil that are made from predominantly genetically modified starchy field corn. Yet, genetically modified foods are not often found in the fresh produce section of American supermarkets. And according to the USDA, a small percentage of zucchini, yellow squash, and sweet corn is genetically modified. Also, most Hawaiian papaya is genetically modified, and genetically engineered apples and potatoes are also starting to enter the U.S. market. So, basically, if you're eating any of these things frequently, you do want to do a little bit of homework on it. And ideally, always be buying these items organic. And so, unfortunate thing in government is that, healthy people, we want companies to have to disclose any genetically modified foods that they're using within any products, of course. And so, unfortunately, it's there are confusing terms being used when it comes to our food, and there isn't proper legalities and regulations right now about how things are labeled. And this is really unfortunate, but honestly, it's more reason that you and I do have to do our homework. So if you're eating any processed foods, we do want to look for items that are certified organic or items that bear the non-GMO Project verified label. I'm sure you've seen this on a lot of stuff, and it does not mean that the food's necessarily organic or perfect. However, if we're looking for those labels, it's we're going to be at least a step closer to doing what's best for our bodies. Okay. And GMO labeling is super important. It's so important. So let's all put our intention out there that this stuff starts shifting in the future. And the more of us that become aware of these things, the better it is. And remember that when you're purchasing anything, you are voting with your dollar. So let's say that the dirty 12 or the dirty dozen, if everybody recognized hey, eating these 12 different produce items, this is fucking dangerous for my health. This is dangerous for my child. This is just plain out dangerous. If we were all hey, we're not going to eat this food that is this coated in chemicals. If we all start making those choices to not give our dollars to the many companies that are making very subpar toxic food for us, they would have to change their practices. That's how this stuff works. So let's start thinking things like that in the future. Okay, so next, EWG goes further into the Dirty Dozen Plus. And so that's basically that, again, they expand their Dirty Dozen list to include a few more things because really, there's more than 12 toxic items when it comes to our produce. So we're highlighting hot peppers quickly, which they do not meet EWG's traditional ranking criteria. However, they are found to be very contaminated with insecticides that are toxic to the human nervous system. So I love hot sauce. I really enjoy spicy things. Maybe you do also. And if so, let's just quickly talk about this. So the USDA tests of 739 samples of hot peppers in 2010 and 2011 found residues of three highly toxic insecticides on a portion of sampled peppers at concentrations that are high enough to cause concern. Okay, these insecticides are banned on some crops, but still allowed on hot peppers. That's crazy, right? That these insecticides are banned on some crops, but hot peppers were fine. In 2015, California regulators tested 72 unwashed hot peppers and found that residues of these 3 pesticides are still occasionally detected on the crop. So these very hazardous, very toxic insecticides still on crops of hot peppers. And so EWG does recommend that people who frequently eat hot peppers buy them organic. So, and if you cannot find or afford organic hot peppers, at least cook them, because pesticide levels typically do diminish when food is cooked. And so because I love information for the sake of information, and I hope you do too, we're going to talk a little bit more about pesticide regulations, because this to me is really important if you are a parent. Okay, so if you're a parent, you got little ones, or you're thinking of having little ones, stay with me here in this podcast for a few more minutes. So the federal government's role in protecting our health, farm workers, and the environment from harmful pesticides is in urgent need of reform, because in the U.S., pesticide regulation, monitoring, and enforcement is scattered across multiple federal and state agencies. And in 91, the USDA initiated the Pesticide Data Program and began testing commodities annually for pesticide residues. But we continue to be concerned about pesticide regulations in the US because it's simply not good enough at all. So the USDA states that a goal of its tests is to provide data on pesticide residues in food with a focus on those most likely consumed by infants and children. And so this is so darn important. Parents and, young adults that don't have children yet, you need to know about this, okay? So there was an article that came out just 2 days ago. Research is showing that 95% of all the baby food in the U.S. is testing positive for the presence of neurotoxic heavy metals in the baby food. So that means that these are toxins that are going to affect a baby's nervous system and brain and gut. That means that children are being altered for life because of the crazy shit that is being put in their food. Okay, so we're talking neurological issues, we're talking behavioral disorders, we're talking about, even everything on the autism spectrum has to do also with the nervous system and gut, of course. So this is so important. So this study that just came out showed that of the different things that are put into the baby food or that is found in there, 73% of baby food in America was found to contain arsenic. That's rat poisoning, okay? 94% of the baby food contained lead. Lead is one of the biggest neurotoxins. 75% of baby food found cadmium and 32% found mercury in them. And so again, these are toxins that are able to cross the blood-brain barrier and to affect the brain, affect the central nervous system, and can permanently alter the developing brain, erode IQ, and affect behavior, okay? So first off, that's not fair to the little child who is eating the food or the baby that's eating the food, okay? We are setting up these souls who are integrated and born into bodies. We're setting them up for failure as a human being and as a soul for their time on earth if we are feeding toxic things that are going to degrade all systems of the body. And then secondly, to be a parent, to have a child that is having illness problems, behavioral problems, neurological problems, as a parent or as a guardian and caregiver, that sucks. That experience sucks. And as we're seeing, it's all completely unnecessary. This is suffering that does not need to be existing. And obviously, that's why I'm passionate about this. And that's why we're talking about this right now, because conversations really do need to be addressing these topics, because these topics are relevant to pretty much all of us right now. And so back to the work of the EWG and talking about pesticides on infant food and children's food. And the USDA states that a goal of its tests is to provide data on pesticide residues in food with a focus on those most likely consumed by infants and children, of course. Yet there are some commodities that are not tested annually, including baby food, oats, and baby formula. Okay, so the last time that baby food was tested until recently was 2013. That's insane. And oats were last tested in 2014, and baby formula last tested in 2014. And so, like, come on. This is what we're feeding and growing new humans on. We should be so aware as a community and as a society of what is being put into the children's bellies and the babies' bellies, because that is going to determine the state of healthcare, the state of, how well we can be educated. Like, really, the food, especially in the early years and the formative years, affects everything. So this is troubling that these things are not getting tested often. And because tests commissioned by EWG found almost 3/4 of samples of popular oat-based foods, including many that are consumed by children, had pesticide residue levels higher than what EWG scientists consider protective of children's health. Okay? Right here, we're doing our children huge disservice. And the chief responsibility of deciding which pesticides are approved for use in the U.S., including deciding what conditions are placed on their approval and setting the pesticide residue levels on foods and crops, falls to the Environmental Protection Agency. But primary enforcement authority for pesticide use on farms is left to states, and the responsibility of testing foods to determine dietary exposures to pesticides is divided between the USDA and the FDA. However, neither the USDA or the FDA regularly tests all commodities for pesticide residues, nor do the programs test for all pesticides commonly used in agriculture. So we can clearly see that there is a lot of room for very, very important testing to be like just lost and caught, falling through the gaps, or however that saying goes. And again, this is affecting our health. This is affecting our children. This is insane. So the pesticide registration process requires companies to submit safety data, proposed uses, and product labels to be approved by the EPA. And however, though, the EPA does not conduct its own independent testing of pesticides. Neither does its review fully capture the risks posed by pesticides because of limitations in available data and failures in risks of assessment, such as excluding synergistic efforts. So this is concerning because scientists have found that the combination of 2 or more pesticides can be more potent than the use of pesticides individually, okay? So that's another reason that we are going to abide when we're shopping by the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15, because those items that have more than 2 or more than 1 pesticide, so like 2 or more pesticides, those are far more dangerous when they're put in conjunction with each other, in combination with each other, than if they were to be had individually, right? So that matters. The primary pesticide law, so the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act, is far less health protective than the laws that protect the safety of our air, our food, water, and environment. And there are many reasons why EWG does fight for pesticide regulations and reform, because there's registration loopholes, there's limited public participation, there's outdated registration and pesticide registration backlogs, and that's just naming a few of them. So these are examples of the potential undermining of marketplace safety as products with harmful health concerns can remain on the market. Not all pesticides registered under this act adequately protect human health and the environment, and federal food tolerance residue levels often allow for higher exposure levels than public health advocates, including EWG, consider to be safe. So all in all, you can see that the business of what's being put onto these crops that we are then eating, it's a shit show. It is a shit show. And, this is more reason to just simply memorize these two simple lists of the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15, and truly to just abide by them when you're shopping, when you're eating, even like I abide by them when I'm going out for dinner. If I'm going to a beautiful Thai place and there's green bell peppers in my curry, and I know that those bell peppers are really not likely organic and they are on the Dirty Dozen, I'm honestly going to order something that doesn't have bell peppers in it. So like there are simple ways that we can eat and shop in ways that we are lessening the toxic burden on our bodies, on our nervous systems, on our guts, on our cellular tissues, like on everything, okay? So how can we avoid these pesticides? So in general, people who do eat organic produce consume fewer pesticides, obviously. In a study published in February, scientists evaluated the impact of an organic diet by monitoring the level of pesticides found in the urine of participating American families, and so this is both adults and children, while they maintained a conventional diet and then after switching to an all-organic diet. Before the organic diet intervention, they detected in the participants' urine potential exposure to more than 40 different pesticides. So like 40 different pesticides were found in our urine before we go to organic. So after about 1 week of eating organic food, participants had on average a 60% reduction in the level of synthetic pesticides measured in their urine compared to obviously when they were eating conventional. So again, I mean, like that's a huge difference. That's a huge difference in just days of what is operating through the body, okay? In 2015, scientists at the University of Washington found that people who report they often or always buy organic produce had significantly lower quantities of insecticides in their urine samples. This was true even though they reported eating 70% more servings of fruits and veggies every day than adults who reported they rarely or never purchased organic produce. So we're saying that even if you're eating tons and tons of fruits and veggies every day, you're still going to be in a much safer situation if you're eating primarily organic. Okay, so now this gets really interesting also because we're talking fertility. So the fertility studies demonstrate potentially subtle but important impacts of eating lower pesticide residue produce. These studies define low and high residue foods in a method similar to the way that EWG does, okay? And so the Washington researchers found that people's self-reported dietary habits correspond to the pesticide measurements in their bodies. And so in this study, male participants who reported the highest consumption of high residue crops had higher concentrations of these insecticides in them, obviously, and in their urine than participants who eat these foods less often. And in 2012, the American Academy of Pediatrics issued an important report that said that children have unique susceptibilities to pesticide residues and their potential toxicity. The organization cited research that linked pesticide exposures in early life to pediatric cancers, decreased cognitive function, and behavioral problems. It advised its members to urge parents to consult reliable resources that provide information on the relative pesticide content of various fruits and vegetables. So that is this, with my voice in your ears right now, that is this information that we are talking about, okay? So again, when our children are eating these things that are very, very toxic and contaminated, it is going to affect their probability of having cancer. It's going to affect their cognitive functioning, and it's going to affect behavioral problems, okay? So all of this matters so much. So all in all, I hope that this gave you a really good breakdown of if we're buying conventional because, we're not affording everything to be organic, that absolutely it is worth prioritizing certain foods to be purchased organic. Like if you're going to eat them at all, certain things you want to be organic, and really if they're not organic, it is not worth the toxic shitstorm to your body to eat them, okay? So that's the point that I really want to drill home here. For the sake of your body, for the sake of your children, for the sake of your loved ones, we want to go organic when it's the things that really matter, okay? And so again, here is that list of the dirty dozen, the things that really matter to go organic, okay? So when I tell you these things, I want you to picture them in your head that we are only eating these items if they are organic, okay? Strawberries, spinach, kale, nectarines, apples, grapes, peaches, cherries, pears, tomatoes, celery, and regular white potatoes, okay? All of that stuff, organic, or we're not even going to do it. And now let's talk the clean stuff, okay? So now buying it conventionally, not organic, these are the things that you're more okay to, okay? So these are the things, don't have to be organic. Avocados, sweet corn, pineapple, frozen sweet peas, onions, papaya, eggplants, asparagus, kiwis, cabbages, cauliflower, cantaloupe, broccoli, mushrooms, and honeydew melons. So I know I've given you each of those lists 3 times now, but repetition is the key to us remembering these things, okay? And again, I just want to really drill home that all of these little choices add up in a body. All of these little choices matter. And again, especially when we're dealing with gut dysbiosis and digestive tract challenges, which over 80% of us are, especially when we're dealing with hormone issues, which most humans are, especially when we're dealing with acidity and inflammation, which most of us are. And again, when we're trying to lose weight or have been gaining weight, which I mean, it's not like, the size of the body isn't a problem, but I mean, when the body is inflamed and toxic, we're going to hold on to weight more, okay? So everything is everything, and the quality of what you're putting in your mouth absolutely matters, because that is what your body's constantly rebuilding with, okay? It really, really matters. So I hope that you have found this useful for you. Go ahead and share this with somebody that needs to know about this. Even you got a friend and she's got a kid with behavioral troubles or nervous system issues. Like, send her this podcast, okay? Let me know if this has been good for you. And as a reminder, always, even though I am giving some health information and inspiration and suggestions here and there, is that none of this is meant to prescribe or to diagnose or to cure or to treat, right? You got whoever you want as a doctor that you want, but I remind you that you are 100% responsible for yourself and your health and whatever type of practitioner that you work with. It's important that they are willing to answer lots of questions, and it's important that you have a trusting relationship where you feel heard and where you are receiving what we could really call informed consent, okay? So I hope that this finds you very, very well. Thank you for listening with me here, and I look forward to seeing you again in the next episode. I love you all so much.